Hello and welcome back to the Watermill.
We're here for the National Live... sorry, it's the first time we're doing this. We're here for the National Mill Weekend, and normally when there's no coronavirus, everyone can come over to the mill and they can walk around, have a chat with us, but obviously because of the coronavirus, we're having to do it virtually.
Which is probably good considering the current condition of the mill. Definitely a work in progress, but we're making good progress on the cleaning, and we'll be doing some tours around to show you what's been happening and where we're at so far. It's still very much, month 2 has been lots and lots of cleaning, lots and lots of mortar removal, getting to the point for when we get our listed building consent, hopefully next week, to repoint all the internals. We'll be able to start on doing all our mortar.
Yeah, because I think for the next couple of months it's going to just be, I'm going to be dreaming mortar, because it's just everything is mortar. So, but it's nice to see the old mortar coming off, and we can actually see the nice stone underneath, and it's making it
where
look...
there is nice stone
Yeah,
underneath.
where there is nice stone underneath, and it's starting to look so much better.
Yeah, it's also, we've steam cleaned all the floors downstairs on, was it Wednesday?
Yeah.
I don't know what day it is. And we obviously add a lot of water into the place when we do that, as steam and as liquid water, which doesn't evaporate off instantly. So we spent the last few days running the heater non-stop, running the fans non-stop, because both our dehumidifiers are down there waiting for return, because they both died in the horrible environment that is our work in progress mill. And it's been amazing to see the difference in how the building has been drying out, because we've been getting loads of condensation on the slate floors because they're cold, and with our heater we had it up to I think 35 degrees last night in here, which is a little bit toasty. It's like a sauna. But we're also seeing some condensation on some of the walls, but it's gone today. So we had it really wet in here as far as humidity goes last night. But now the walls are pretty much dry, because we've had... It's dried out faster than when we were steam cleaning all the walls. Before, with the 2 dehumidifiers running, it's actually dried out faster than that.
Because it's got somewhere to escape now,
Yeah,
whereas
the walls
before it's just...
We've got a lot of the cement off the walls. We've got only a few more patches of cement left to pull off. We've got all the vinyl paints off the walls, which was...
awful.
Really difficult.
Horrible,
There's
yeah.
still some patches which we're working on. We've still got a few bits of wall, like the walls back there still need to be done. Some sections of the right-hand side back there needs to be done, but the lime is exposed, as mouldy as it is.
Yeah. And I just want to say that I'm not as tall as Mark. I'm standing on a box. So yeah, it's otherwise it couldn't get us in the same shot. It looked a bit weird.
And last night when we were testing stream, because we only got the internet here last night, we did lose the internet for about half an hour. So if it does go out, we will put it back on.
Yep.
We've lost power briefly already today, but all the stuff for the stream should be on battery backup, so hopefully.
Hopefully we're still here.
Yeah, it's not the most reliable place to be in the world as far as power and internet goes, but hopefully we'll be good.
Keeping going, yeah.
Let's check if there's any comments. Anyone even watching?
Somebody else. So I'll step out of the way so you guys can see the machinery a bit closer.
Ruth and Gary. A few people here. This is probably about 20 seconds behind.
Burselman. Where's Burselman?
Oh, yeah. You know where it is?
Ursula. Should I ask him? So Gary, we were just wondering, where is Burselden? We're not up on everywhere at the moment, so we're all a bit clueless here. So if you just let us know in the comments.
So we can actually switch. We've got a camera downstairs as well. We can take you down there to have a look at the machinery room. So this is the machinery room downstairs. We've got directly below the millstones, obviously. We have most of the machinery intact. It's in very poor condition. If anybody knows more about the machinery, how it would have worked, we'd love to certainly hear a lot more about it, because we're new to Watermills. This is our main gear coming off the water wheel, so the shaft is still intact, all the bearing blocks are still intact, everything's still got grease on it. Was literally digging the grease out with a shovel from down here the other day. There's a lot of grease on everything, so despite the rust, there's still lots of grease on all these teeth. There's rust below the grease, but you know, take what you can. So we're pretty hopeful that things are not going to be completely seized. There's very little chance that we're going to be able to get the wheel running again, because we don't have water rights. The mill lathe is missing sections, and it's just not going to be really possible to get water running over the wheel unless we pump it. But the wheel pit is also not on our land, so the wheel is sort of sitting into land which doesn't belong to us, which is amazing. We'd love to be able to get control of that, but it's a bit out of our price range at the moment. So yeah, we won't be able to have the machinery working, but we want to have it restored eventually back to the point where it could. So, you know, if you turn something, it turns. I feel quite lucky that we've got something which looks so terrible, but you can still turn handles on things and they do turn. You can still see grease dripping off things. It's a lot more than we expected when we bought the place and we first came up here, and we were expecting it basically to be completely all seized shut, but it's been looked after and it hasn't really been touched since the mill stopped working. So while all the belts are falling apart and a lot of the timber is falling apart, the metal portions are in pretty good condition. Just point this up. This is your and up here we've got the main gear which drives all the stones, and obviously has wood teeth as they used to, so that if the machinery seized, the teeth would break and nobody would die, which is always great. And the wheels, the main castings, wouldn't break either, because obviously you're replacing a couple of wooden teeth which are just wedges you can pull out. Is a lot easier than replacing these castings, which would have probably come from Edinburgh, which is 400 miles away or so. And back then it would have been effectively a rowboat or sailboat across from Scotland to get here, and not quite as easy as the ferries we have. We've also got some of the 12-volt electrics from the 1940s when they put a generator off the diversion channel, which is all rubber insulated, brass fittings, which we're going to have to make go away because all the rubber is in pretty bad condition, and outside the rubber is absolutely terrible. It's not even got copper wires on it. But we've also got some additions, we think, to the machinery. So there's another gear back here which you can't see from where you are, but it goes to the machinery down the side of this floor, because this is on a concrete pillar, and we're not sure on the age of this, but this is a little bit confusing because the 1940s concrete which we've got in the building, such as the floors where the camera is sitting, is concrete over the slate flags, and the kiln is in 1940s concrete, and it's basically made from the seashore. So we've got lots of seashells and really heavy grit in there. And this is looks a lot more like the 1980s cement that we've got in the building. So there's this pillar of cement here, and we've got another wheel here which would have raised and lowered obviously into the main gear. Every time I touch it, it falls apart more. And then that just goes to a wheel back there, which then drives the machinery just out there. If we can go have a look at that. So we've got, this machine is all powered off that extra pillar. We just on Wednesday removed the last of the random doors and debris from back here and found there's another hopper back here and a little alcove which was full of just sawdust. I assume there used to be wood in there, but there wasn't really anything left. So this machine is running off the wheel as well, and we're told that this used to run all the way to the kiln. So there's an opening on the kiln wall which we're told the basically, I think this is below the blower upstairs. So we think the husks might have been coming down here, and the husks would have gone into the kiln for storage to be used for the fire. That's the kiln here. We've got a bunch of props just sitting in here. They're not propping anything up. If things are a little bit quiet today, we're going to finish propping the floors down here. But this opening would have been the walkway through into the kiln fire, which we're going to turn into our walkway through because the kiln is going to actually finally get renovated. It hasn't been touched since the 50s or so. When they did the conversion to residential here in the 80s, there was nothing done with the kiln. There's photos from the 90s of the place with the tiles on the roof already starting to go away. So nothing was done with the kiln at all. The roof in there is literally falling down inside. It's missing a third of the slates outside, the asbestos tiles outside. It's had birds living in there for years. So the previous owners had put a hole in the wall here to get the bird manure out, but that was just blowing it all through here when the wind blew. So we've had wheelbarrow loads of rubbish coming out of here from the kiln. And yeah, so this would have been our opening. This machinery would have extended the entire length down here, but was removed at some point. We're assuming in the 80s, because the person who told us that, they owned it in the 1940s. And their name is actually on the floorboards up here, because the mill caught fire, well, the kiln caught fire in, I think it was 1937, and it was then sold. We're not sure if it was repaired before it was sold or after, but there were definitely still repairs going on after it was sold, because we've got the names on the floorboards here. These beams up here are more modern than the ones on the top floor. They're probably more of a fast-grown pine. They're all disintegrating. They're all very heavily eaten by bugs. We've got lots of woodworm in there, and it's just all falling apart. So if we can move the camera over here, we can see the beams don't meet the wall, sadly. So we've got props on every other beam, just because we don't have an infinite supply of props, and they're not cheap when you need loads of them. So yeah, up here we've got lots of missing beam. So our original plan was that we were just going to basically joint in a new section, probably 100 mil or so, 650 mil long scarf joint, but unfortunately the timbers in the bottom third are still really bad, even 1.5 meters out. So we're working on a strategy for that. We've got in our current listed building application a plan to repair these and remove the rotten floorboards, because our helper stepped through the floor here. So he was just walking along and putting down doing some cleaning, I think, and put his foot straight through the floor, which has happened upstairs as well. So we need to get these floorboards up. These are 1940s floorboards, so they're historic, but they're not particularly historic. But they have been very heavily eaten, as all the wood in this place has been very heavily eaten. And we need to make sure that it's going to be structurally safe and sound so the building can survive another 250 years. Over here we've got the end of this machine, and we can see, I can get my finger in the shot, down here there is no leg on the bottom of the machine, and we've got lots of woodworm having eaten the rest of it. And up the top of it, the support which goes to the roof has completely fallen off, and the whole machine is leaning because this is not attached to anything anymore. The nails which would have been in here have rusted away entirely. When we were just sweeping, we bumped the foot of this and it just disintegrated to sawdust. And that's not uncommon. The same thing happened with the stairs. This was attached up there but has since fallen over. There's just not enough timber left in the wood to support it. So we have to figure out a plan to get this away from the wall so we can clean it. So if anyone's got experience with millwrights, we would love, as part of this stream, to get some advice on moving machinery, because we've got that in our list of building consent, because we're afraid that some of the machinery is going to disintegrate as we move it. We will be doing full 3D models of everything, so if it does fall apart, we can rebuild it effectively, or rebuild the bits which fall apart, because it's just this, it's more like cardboard or sponge, which is really sad. We were hoping to be able to save more of it, but it just falls to pieces. You know, you just touch it and you get bits of sawdust come off it. So we'll do our best with it though. It's not like we're going out trying to damage things, but we need to be able to insulate the building. Go upstairs and have a look at comments.
So, hi everybody. So basically what we've been trying to do is brush the machinery with a really soft brush to get everything off it without damaging it. And then at the back, we are just trying to get that mortar off there, which is a bit difficult to get to because of obviously all the stuff in the way. And then because we've put the boards down now, we can walk it all the way at the back because the floors at the back were really, really damaged. And Mark's just setting up so that you guys can have a closer look at the at all the machinery, for a much closer view, because we can't move this camera because it's attached to everything. Yeah.
Me too.
Sorry?
So, yeah, big camera, but we have, this is the blower, which is a Bamford machine. So this is directly above the machine we were just looking at downstairs. It looks in pretty good condition from here. There's loads of grease on it. The handle still does turn, but I don't want to do too much because I don't want to damage these springs because they're completely rotten. So in here there is, most of this is grease and pigeon droppings and sawdust all mixed together, which is absolutely delightful. But we've still got very clear visibility of the castings in there. I don't really have enough light. I'll bring this light over. Don't know if you'll be able to make that out, but it's Bamford in England. And you can still see the paint on here. It's beautifully painted and detailed. We're not sure of the age of this. It's another piece of machinery we just don't know the age of, but it's also disintegrating. So along the wall here, this is another thing we're going to have to remove off the wall because we have to put insulation to meet building standards. So we will have about 100 millimeters off the wall having to go away, which is about where the lime wash is on there. So we shouldn't lose too much of the machinery, or we may just end up having to set the machinery inwards from the wall a bit more. And the blower would have blown out of here. And there's hooks on all the corners, which I'm guessing a bag would have been attached to. Where things get really terrible though is back in this corner. I don't think I can get the camera in any further than this. It's quite a big camera. But we've got on the woodwork, we're missing large sections of it as it's all been eaten. So a lot of work to do still on this. The floor doesn't exist at all there. This is directly above the machinery room. There's a window back there, which we may be able to see. So that window was open for probably 15 years, and that's sort of the predominant direction of wind coming in that window. So there would have been all the rain just blowing straight through here. So the box back there is, we would have had, we think that's where the sluice gate control would have been, which would have diverted water to the diversion track off the water wheel, but we're not sure. It's been blocked up, so I can't see too much of that. Down here, if the camera will tilt that far, it will. We have these cast metal plates in the floor, which have a hole in them, and I actually found the key for that yesterday. It's in the truck. And that would have allowed you to, the big screws downstairs, which would have had the gears on them, which go into the main gear, you can turn those, and that would have raised and lowered the basic workings for each stone. So we've got 3 of those, and we have 3 stones. That would have brought those into contact. We have a nice big gear in the center, which continues up to the top floor because the winch was all driven off the water wheel as well. And I believe the drying floor would have had a rope going to it also that would have been used to pull the shovel along. These floors needed a huge amount of propping. We've got that in a video which will be coming up soon, but the back raft, well, the back joist back there, we had to lift probably 150 millimeters, 100 millimeters, and there's no floor whatsoever to stand on, so you're standing on this tiny little lip of stone as you're trying to crank the floor above you up, and everything's falling down on you because there's no floorboards up there either, as the floors above were also in a similar condition. Similar story over on this side. We've got all the belts which go on a reduction drive over to the machine next to me, which I'll show you in a second, which are all pocketed into the wall. This machinery over here is looking a lot better than the other side, but still very heavily eaten by woodworm. If I bring over a little bit, we can see here the top wood is in a substantial state of decay. Unfortunately, also the surrounds of the millstones on the leftmost stone is missing quite a lot of it as it's been rusted away. When we were doing some cleaning yesterday, we were just vacuuming near a piece of metal, not up here, it was on a piece which is in the truck now, and it just, you got flakes of metal come away and there's just nothing left. It's just flakes of metal in the shape of a sheet of metal. Again, this main drive up here on this floor is wooden toothed, and you would have been able to pull the pin out of here, and that would have been able to get dropped down to come into contact, which would have, I don't know, no, that wouldn't have driven the blower, so because that's driven from below, so I'm not sure what that wheel would have gone to. Don't know if it went upstairs or drove some other machinery in here, or it's historic, but that's on one, and then the other side is on exactly the same mechanism, just mirrored around the other way. We've got wood bushings up there which are covered in grease, which the shaft would have gone through a wood bushing. Got a bright light hidden down there, but this is in relatively good condition. We think this is relatively modern, as it does have galvanized metal on it in most places. This strap's galvanized but still rotten. There's not much left of it, and we've got the cast iron there, and this whole thing is able to shake, and that's all still greased and still works. We've also got some of the pulleys up there still have bits of belt sort of welded to them, as they were rubber belts, more modern rubber belts, which would have come across from there. And yeah, lots of hoppers and stuff, but they also ran the electrics in the 80s up through this machinery. So the paths going downwards have got lots of old electrical cables in, which we're working to remove. Had all sorts of bits of electrics attached to them.
So on here as well, what we have is there's marks here. I think they're either scratches or pencil, where they have written down the calculations that they need to do for the different amounts of bags, or amount of flour, or amount of whatever it is, grain that they need to be working with. And they've made those markings on this machinery, so that's why it's really important for us to try and keep this as much as is, so that that can be preserved, because it's just really an interesting part to see. Then, so what I've been working on a lot, is this wall over here to my right, and that is a wall where it's quite a strange wall, because it's got mortar, and then it's got plaster, and then it's got some sort of paint over it. I'm not too sure what kind. And when I tried to steam clean it, nothing shifted at all. It took a lot of, and the mill was just getting wetter and wetter and wetter. So, which is not something we really want to do that much. And so I just finally gave up and said, okay, well, we're going to really work on just digging away at it and getting it off. And it was really, really hard because it doesn't crack off. It's so wet, the stone's so wet that it's just like mud, really.
The stone's sort of delaminating almost, and you just end up getting crumbly bits of really fine stone just breaking away off the face of the stone.
And you're trying to use the what was it again?
The SDS.
The SDS drill to chisel it away at it, and with the other areas which aren't so bad, you can sort of put it on the stone and it makes like a tiny little mark. Whereas over here, you'll put it on the stone and it just cracks and breaks away. So it's it's just sad to see it not looking so good. So it doesn't look as good as the other exposed stone walls, but we will be covering that up at a later date. So it's not going to be so much of a problem, but we just want to get as much of the old stuff off as possible because it's just making it so damp and just damaging the
it's really
the stone
interesting
so much.
You can see, we might be able to bring the camera back later and have a look, but it's where Taryn has removed the plaster. You can see the stone is dry and the lime mortar around it is dry after a few days. But where the plaster, there's patches of plaster still, everything's still sopping wet. The mortar is just really wet. The plaster obviously is impermeable to moisture, so it's just trapping everything behind it. And the stone is just falling apart because of it. So the plaster it's not cement, so it's not like the walls we've had to remove loads of cement. It's really difficult. It does come off, but it is a little bit harder than doing it just the lime, like
the mortar.
When we take the lime mortar off that back wall, we just do that with basically the back of a claw hammer. Is what we've found to be the most effective.
Or you just hit it with a hammer and it starts to crack, and then you just do that, and then it just starts falling down. So
whereas like we've tried not to use the electric tools on really any of the walls except where there's cement, because you can hammer on that with a chisel all day.
Nothing will happen.
You'll remove about 100 square millimeters of material, and even with the SDS, you're removing like a square meter a day. Absolute maximum a square meter a day. So it's just so slow going. I don't want to look at that wall much anymore. And also it starts getting higher, so then I have to sit on a ladder. Like we have the ladder that flattens out, and I either have to sit on that or stand on the ladder to get the other bits. And it's just because it's such slow going, it takes a lot more effort and really awkward positions to get rid of it. But yeah, we're getting there. I mean, some of the other walls still need a bit of work done to them, but I think those ones will be a lot quicker as long as they don't have plaster on them. Yeah, so on this floor, we've done probably 70% of the wall over here. Nothing past that window for a bit because we didn't want to get too close to the machinery.
And also that's plaster.
With it. And then a bit of the back wall there just to see how it was going, because that was a very verdant green. Then nothing on that side, which is why you can still see the lime mortar on the wall there. No, we haven't touched that wall at all. And then we've only lightly steamed in there because the machinery is very difficult to get around, and the floors have been virtually non-existent until we put the plywood down. And even then, the plywood is still a little bit unstable because there's really nothing underneath it. It's just, there's areas where you can see a beam, but as soon as you touch it, it crumbles to sawdust. It's really hard to just make clear just how it just, like, you touch it and it literally falls to sawdust like you were in a cartoon.
But it's good that at least some of this wood machinery is still in fairly good condition, that we can try and preserve it rather than it being...
We can save most of it. It's just, we may need to have modern replacement parts, and if we have to replace full beams of the floor we're standing on, we will be taking all the sections which are, we've got about 1.5 meters of really good wood in the middle of them. we'll take those, we'll repair all the floors in the machinery room with them as much as we can as far as the beams.
Yep.
Because a lot of the beams which are the worst in there are that size.
Yep.
The really huge beams, we've got 350, 400 millimeter square beams. You can't get replacements for those anymore. But thankfully, those are also supported on the cast iron works in there, which rather than just on the walls, because where they're attached to the walls, they are as rotten as everything else is. But they are supported by the big cast iron pillars, so we still have some structure under these millstones, because when we're inspecting in there and you like poke things and they fall apart, or you poke a massive beam of wood and your finger goes straight through it, which I'm not that strong. It's a little disconcerting when you realise that there's several tons of stone sitting right over your head.
Yeah, so that's why it's a bit, you have to be really cautious where you step originally, but now we have the props up and everything, it's a bit safer. But yeah, I kept on standing on the boards and there'd be a slight uneven area and I'd sort of shake because I'm like thinking they're falling through the floor. But everything's safe, so it's just even when it's slightly uneven, it just, yeah. But no, we're getting there. It's a lot safer now. And we've managed to figure out, like mark out the places, especially on the roof, where the beams are salvageable and the ones that aren't. So,
yeah, so Fluffy Jenkins, who's been commenting on a lot of our videos, has just said, he's asking if we're going to be replacing the beams and the floors, and we're hoping to salvage as much of the floors as possible. These beams are
really
actually pretty fantastic. The ends of them are not. But 50 to 100 millimeters out from the wall, you'd like tap on them with a hammer and they sound
solid,
absolutely fantastic. It's just the bits in the wall are really terrible. So there's a prop right here. We've got props on top of all the ones below, and we're going to be adding more. But other than that, the wood of these is probably pitch pine and it hasn't been eaten. So it's in really good condition. But the floorboards upstairs and even down here, like you vacuum and you lift the top of the wood off. So we're going to try to salvage the wood. Or
reuse it somewhere else, as we've said before.
We were kind of hoping that we would be able to get maybe one floor's worth of timber left out of the 2 floors, but we're starting to think that...
The more we vacuum it, the more that comes up, and you realise, no, that's not going to last.
Yeah, this is pretty much from here back is...
completely unusable.
Yeah, there's just you step on it and it
down there is
bends
all
completely. From here to the grain hoist and into the grain hoist, there is really nothing. Behind this machine, there's nothing. We came in this morning and there were bits of floor on the ground. We've just vacuumed everything. So we know that the floors were absolutely pristine downstairs.
And other bits
of
floor
bits of floorboard have fallen down overnight.
The other interesting thing about it being in here is while we've been working on everything, I've suddenly been having these flutters flying in front of the lights, and it's we've got at least 4 butterflies inside, and so they keep appearing from somewhere and everywhere.
I think because we've just had the heat so high in here, they've all decided to hatch.
Yeah, so they've been flying around inside, which is kind of nice. A bit disconcerting when you're trying to do stuff and you have your headphones on and your earmuffs on and you can't, and then suddenly something moves.
It goes across the light.
But so we've got a lot of butterflies in here. Then we've got
carpet moths.
Moths, we've got,
because we've had all the previous owners' junk sitting all on the floor directly above us, basically, which is why we've got props here. Because it was all weighing down the floors. And so we think they've had moths living in their stuff, because that stuff's probably been in for 5 years. Yeah. And there was a lot of rugs and
stuff for
children's homework.
And stuff
all sorts of things that things like to
German
eat.
dictionary.
Lots of random stuff. Caravan awnings. And so things which, bugs like to eat. So obviously they've been in here. We found rat nests. We've found loads of bodies of rats and pigeons and everything.
Yeah, I was like, bodies. You said loads of bodies of rats. So I'm like, yeah.
Also, there's asking about the stairs. So we're actually, these stairs are 1980s editions.
Yeah.
They're really nicely made, but they're also in a really awkward position.
Yeah, they take up the space of an area that's already taken up with space.
Yeah, we've only got limited space with the machinery. So we are going to be moving the stairway into the kiln.
Yeah.
We've got a really nice plan for that, so it's not just one continuous stair, it's sort of one stair, then another stair in another spot,
Yep.
which will give us a nice bit of space and hopefully make the smallish kiln look a bit more airy and open.
Yeah.
And
especially because the kiln doesn't have as much, it doesn't have as many windows.
No,
we'll be putting some in, but it's not...
we're trying not to put more holes into the building than we
have
need
to.
We've got to put some in for fire regulations, we need to put some in for access, and I think we're putting in one window.
I'm not sure, I can't remember now.
Yeah, just the one on the front.
Yeah, we
Because
just...
the back's already got... Oh, one on the front, one on the back, on the
One on the
floor,
front and one on the back,
and then the top floor stays as it is.
Yeah, otherwise it would be too dark, because
Yeah,
there would be
there's no light whatsoever.
whatsoever.
It was designed as a kiln for drying grain. It didn't need light.
So that's basically. I mean, because also if we didn't take the stairs out of here, the kitchen would be. You'd have the gap in the wall with the arches. You'd have the other bit of machinery to the side. You'd have the two pillars. There would be no space to put anything.
This much space.
yeah. So you kind of have to.
And I don't know if these would actually meet modern building standards.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
They're incredibly steep. They're very shallow stair tread, and I don't think they're wide enough to meet fire eggs. If they are wide enough to meet fire eggs, they'll be wide enough by just a few millimeters. Because fire regulations require a certain width so that a fireman in all his gear can safely go up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
And these are pretty narrow.
Yeah.
So we may not be able to.
We wouldn't want to keep them anyway, And we'd want to take it back to the way it originally looked, which was the beams going all the way across rather than
and they're
being
missing
cut.
Sections of them as well, and they're really wobbly because
People
they're
have
really decayed.
Yeah, and also they've been stealing bits of the stairs, like the bottom of the stairs to patch up other areas, so
So we'll be trying to make use of the materials, like the floorboards, which we do pull up. If there are any sound sections of them, they might make really good replacements. Like for behind the blower around here, there's nothing left of the back side, which I was showing the front side here, where it looks a bit decayed. The back side, there isn't anything left. So we might be able to use some floorboards as replacements there, as once it's planed down, it would make a sufficient thickness to replace those, and we keep the wood in the mill. Very much a conservation thing of keeping the material in the mill rather than just throwing it all out or burning it or whatever. It's much better to keep it going.
Yeah.
What you laughing at?
I'm laughing at Fluffy Jenkins' comment.
What's he saying?
I wouldn't want to be walking up those stairs trying to get snacks from the kitchen.
The kitchen's going to be on the ground floor. We're on the mid floor.
So this is the living room.
This will be our lounge, which is going to be great because we'll have all of this as one end of our lounge room. People have their decorative clutter. We've got this.
Yep.
We win.
I don't know what you'd use it for, but it's nice to look at.
It'll look really cool, I think.
Yep.
And if we get some really nice lighting in here, I think we could really make this a huge feature.
Yep.
The same downstairs where we've got that wooden panel wall between the main area and the mill machinery, we will be putting glass across there so that we can see into the machines.
But then you're not having all that issues of having machinery, even though it's not moving, where you can get into it, especially with a
tiny human
child.
Yeah, we don't want a tiny human getting, because the gear pit is really
deep.
And it's some big ledges there with some very pointy bits of metal around. Even when we're steam cleaning in there on Wednesday, because we have kind of been avoiding cleaning in there because it's been fairly low priority. Finally got in there with
it's hard to get in.
Even with 200 watts or something of cinema lighting,
it's really hard to see.
You can see balloons of light, and it's still you're having to feel your way through with your foot to make sure you're not about to fall
through
completely through, because there's some big drops in there.
We're going to show them upstairs now?
Yep, we can do that.
Okay.
So we've got doors and bits of plywood all over the floors here because I think the top floor is the worst. This wall was super green. It was the roof up there is the section which is the worst. We're missing lots of slates up there. I can see daylight where I'm standing straight outside, so the floors here is like nothing. Straight through the floor because there is no floor. Same in this corner. Before we put the props under the floors here, you couldn't walk where I'm standing because the beams weren't attached to the wall. They were kind of hanging off little bits of sawdust in the wall, and the ends were not supported. So even standing out, metre and a half from the wall, the bounce on the floor was quite epic. This is a wooden cover which has the shaft going up to the mechanisms for the grain hoist, the winch for that, and I presume also would have had something going down for the kiln because we've got machinery over here as well. Got belts up here. I don't quite know what those were for. Yeah, we've got roof lights which are getting replaced with more modern conservation ones, larger. So we've got big pulleys here, we've got a big pulley, little pulley, some belts still up there, but it's attached to a piece of wood, so this is probably original. It hasn't been moved here accidentally or something, with the main mechanism over here. We've got coming up here, these are all cast iron. This one's actually got cast bushings. So I'm assuming there's bushings with some sort of white metal or something behind that. Loads of grease on everything there and bits of fiberglass insulation, which is what you want. But this is sort of on a, almost looks like a sled. So there's two wooden beams which run down there, but they're not straight. And we don't know if that's been done as a modern thing or if it was always kind of hanging off on an angle, because it doesn't run down the center of the building. It starts out pretty central and then ends up over here where the lovely wife is standing. And we've got all the chains and ropes and stuff over here, which then go through into the grain hoist, which we've finally covered up the top floor. Just now stopped the birds completely getting in here. We've still got lots of doors and chutes for grain and stuff up here. We're not sure where these chutes are from. We've got several chutes here. We've got a bit of grain hoist door and some more random doors. We've got loads of doors here. We've got more doors than there would have been rooms. So random. And this framing is from the 1980s. We haven't removed it because down here they had the water tank was here, which would have been in the loft tank. In the UK, for those of you who are not from the UK, we tend to have a loft tank which water gets put into and then that gravity feeds everything else. I think it's a really weird system as someone not from the UK, but you know. But to put that in, they cut the collar, the tie between the roof, and just cut it to put it up through there. So we're missing a tie, and given the state of some of these beams, we're just leaving this here as it is, helping the building structurally. Over here we've got paint, so every beam, every raft which has got yellow paint, we've slated as needing either full replacement or partial replacement. We can't check the upper sections very easily without getting a ladder and moving it between every single one, which would take forever. So we've just marked the bottom sections are typically the worst looking. So we've got our timber quote in now for all of that. We're just waiting on our building warrant before we can be happy to go and order that, as it's a substantial amount of money to get all the timbers for the building. But this is all just falling apart. So when we go to pull the nails, which were holding the old plasterboard out, we would pull out massive, like, fistfuls of wood with the nail. As the rusty nail was better attached to the wood than the wood was attached to itself. And it's just really heavily eaten. Some of the wood, like this one, or is it this one? This one has got 1938 written on it. It's got 1938 carved into this piece. You're not going to get a camera in there. And so we're pretty sure this was from the fire. This was replaced after the fire. As if the kiln caught fire, it probably would have made this area a little bit toasty. So we're going to keep that 1938 one, even though it probably should get replaced. It's got a lot of woodworm in it, but it's not too bad. Sounds a little hollow at the bottom half, but is kind of okay up at the sarking board. So I kind of want to keep that one just because it's got that carving in it. But the others which we've marked need to go away. If you point up here. So yeah, this is from pulling out a tiny nail, and that's from pulling out a tiny nail. I've just got, it's like sponge. That's because the roof lights leak. So we had, a couple of weeks back, we had a really big storm. So we're getting 60, 70 mile per hour winds coming from the direction this roof is facing. And the water basically just gets blown up under the slates, under the roof light. And we were having not like waterfalls of water, but jets of water spraying almost across the mill as they were getting blasted up and out of there. Quite a bit of wind pressure. So this is our lovely gap. Which, very classy job there. Just sawn straight off there, as you do. But that's just part of the fun. All of our lintels need replacing in here as well. Just as another bit of wood which needs to go. Pretty much all of the lintels, which are the bits above the windows and doors, are fairly rotten. There's just like some of them, there's just nothing left. The whole, like a couple of rows of stone above them are falling in, but it's just the internal lintels. The external lintels are stone and still fine. We've got 800mm thick walls, so there's no worry about the sturdiness of the walls. You know, walls are basically 3 foot thick, and it's difficult to damage that. But one of the reasons we bought this property is we've got really good walls. A lot of properties, especially mills, can have really bad walls, especially in the kiln. The kiln with its big V shape of concrete, which is just pushing up against the wall, can push the walls out. Thankfully ours, the concrete's not so great, so it's all just crumbling inwards. So where you'd normally have a straight section of kiln, it's U-shaped or bowed, where it's breaking, which bits haven't fallen in already. Actually, if we get a screwdriver, we can open this up and you can have a little look-see through there. But we might take you down to the mid-floor first. I'll switch to the mid-floor camera, and we'll get a screwdriver or impact driver, and you can have a look into the kiln. John's asking if we're going to do the roof before we do the internal wood. We're hoping to have permission for the roof soon. We had our building warrant in since February. It should only take a couple of months, but our architect misunderstood what I'd specified for the roof. So I'd spec'd out the roof as being slate, then a batten going across the top of the rafters, and then we had another 25mm gap inside the rafter, and then our insulation board, which is waterproof, and over that we had a breathable membrane, which would have given us our 50mm gap above the insulation board as the manufacturer requires, but he'd drawn it a little bit differently. So building standards said, no, that's not going to work. Completely agree with them. All the things which we've had back from building standards and from planning have been really insightful. So a lot of people complain about, building standards and, planning, wanting to get in your business and tell you the way it's meant to be done, but we're fine with that. It's all in the hope of building buildings which are going to survive longer and be more useful in the future and be practical in 50 years time, or for the needs as people get older, and not just for us as occupants but future occupants. So hopefully we'll get that planning for the building warrant through soon. We've sent through revised drawings. We've got all our condensation risk assessments done, which all came back as absolutely zero condensation risk because it's completely vapor permeable the entire way through. So we've actually changed the way we're going to do it because of what building standards have said. We thought we'll just go all out, and we have to bring all the rafters in, which I originally didn't really want to do, which is why I was putting the insulation between the rafters, which at the end of the day, it's not really any extra work to go one way or the other, but this way we're going to put the insulation board on top of the rafters, and that will then mean that we've lifted the roof, and then we have a batten across that and a counter batten for the slates to sit on, which means that we've essentially added 120mm to the outside of the roof. So we have to bring all our rafters in by that much so that the slates sit where they currently are, because otherwise we'll go above the parapets on the outside and it'll look really weird. So we keep the slates on exactly the same plane they are now, and then we just bring the roof in, which will make it super duper watertight. The advantage of going this way as well is that with the insulation on top of the rafter, we don't have any cold bridging from the rafter, basically acting as a thermal conductor, taking heat out. So we don't need to insulate the inside of the rafter. We can just put our service cavity in between the rafters, which saves us some space inside. So at the end of the day, our roof inside and outside will effectively end in the same place, and we'll end up with everything looking the same. It's just going to be done in a different order, but it'll be ultra waterproof because we'll have 3 waterproof layers, so we're not going to have the issues we've had here. One of the issues with buildings with such thick walls is that the roof ends on top of the walls, so if you have any leaks on the ends, you can have a lot of issues with water running down between the walls, like through the center of the walls. So that's one advantage of the way we're doing it, is there's virtually no chance of water being able to leak off the end of the roof into the wall and or between the sections of the roof like we have with sarking board and the wind blowing up, because we've got really strong winds here all the time. So we want to make sure that it's as waterproof as possible, because this building's had enough issues with water. Well, let's go upstairs and have a look into the kiln. So upstairs we have our lovely opening, which has a 1980s breeze block chimney, and in here we can already hear the pigeons. So this is one thing we definitely would love to have some input from people on, is all of this flooring has got about a metre of pigeon poo on it. And all of it is cast iron, so it's sitting on cast iron grates essentially, and it's all hanging out from the wall on basically just cantilevered off I-beams, which are not particularly big. So we can see an I-beam there, and we've got one coming across the front. We've also got over there a pillar, but this is no longer attached to the pillar. So it's just all hanging there. And we're still trying to figure out a safe way to basically drop these floors and clear the debris off them. I don't think I can drop this camera any lower, unfortunately, otherwise I would show you what the roof looks like or doesn't look like. But that beam there is a rafter or a collar, I'm not sure which one. There's lots of bits falling down. And then we've got the concrete, so you can see the large crack running up the concrete there. So that's concrete we've all got to remove. And then if we look further down, I'm trying not to drop the camera through. We've got a lot of debris down there as well. There's a good probably metre of debris at the bottom as well. But we've got to remove all of this cement. We've got to remove all of these floors. And it's going to be a major undertaking. But this is one of the biggest jobs. So the roof and removing the kiln is pretty much the biggest job we've got. To get a nice view out that window. So that window, if I change my aperture down, we can just see out that window. Beautiful view across the farmland there, and that's going to be one of our bedroom windows, master bedroom, and the other will be that window. Yeah, this is all very much to do. We have permission to remove all of this as far as listed property consent goes and planning permission, but we need the building warrant, as the building warrant covers all of our demolitions. So we need to have permission before we can touch any of this, which is why we haven't touched any of it. We've had comments saying, why don't you get the roof sealed? It would be great having it waterproofed, but the reality is that we have to have the building warrant first. We can't really do any demolition or construction without the building warrant. Yeah, we have to have permission before we can do a lot of stuff. Because it's a listed property, we have to have listed property consent for pretty much anything we do. We have to have a planning permission for anything which is exterior or changing the use of the building. We have to have then a building warrant for anything which involves construction or demolition. So it's quite a process to get things done, but listed property, listed consent takes 3-4 weeks. We're at 3 weeks now on our second listed property consent. So we're hoping in the next week we'll hear back about that, which is going to be our floors, all of our ripping up the floorboards, removing or repairing the joists, moving the machinery, repointing the inner walls, and stabilising the grain hoist. So the council's been really good about it. They know the condition of the property. They're really keen to see it put back into use. They've been very helpful with advice on things. So we just got to go through the process. Basically, when we're asking, do we need permission to do this or that? Like, so we're asking about doing cement. They said, yes, please take the cement off anything which is going to help the building work properly. They're all for, and modern materials we don't need to have permission to remove. So we can go nuts on the cement, which has been great. We didn't need to have listed property consent for that. Modern finishes can all come off. Modern additions can sometimes come off if they're not really structural. It's like I don't think we'd be able to remove the stairs, even though they're relatively modern. We would need the building warrant for that. But the council's been quite good on advice. It's just been a little bit slow because, coronavirus, the council's not in the office, despite the fact there haven't been any cases here for a long time. We're a fairly low risk area. The council's following all the standard advice from the Scottish government, which is fantastic. But it means that it's a little hard to get in contact with someone. So the time it's easier just to put in, we found a listed property application and wait for that, then email the council and ask, do we need one? As we did that with this one, we emailed them saying, hey, do we need listed property consent before we do these things? And in the time we could have gotten listed property consent is how long it took them to get back to us and say, yes, you do. So well, at least we know in the future, just put it in, and if we don't need it, then we've got permission anyway. So if we do need it, then it's in process. It's a good way to make sure we've got everything. Let's check what comments we got. Daniel's asking, can we just poke the floors with a stick? And that is definitely one of our top plans, actually. But the challenge is, how do we get to it? Because we don't want to do it from below, because if you poke it with a stick from below, you will almost certainly have several tons of bird crap land on you. If we do it from above, we need to get access to it. We have all our scaffolding out there now, but we haven't set it up. We don't need consent to listed property consent because we're not attaching it to the building, and we don't need any building warrant to set up temporary scaffolding as it's a temporary erection, so it's all good to go. We have thought about maybe running some scaffolding board between the windows upstairs, and that might give us a position to sit on to poke at the floors. We also have the other problem with the front is that the corner of the building has kind of been chamfered a little bit so that the road can come past. The building predates the road by a couple of centuries, so they just built the road really close to the building, which is not ideal because it means when we go to put our scaffolding out the front, we still have to figure out, are we going to close the road to do that, or do we build the scaffolding up and then cantilever out after a certain height? It's a little challenging as there's just no frontage out the front of the building for us to put scaffolding. So getting up there to be able to get into the window to poke at the floors is somewhat of a challenge. If we're hoping that the stuff on the floors, the drying floor in the kiln is going to be similar to what's on the ground. On the ground, it's very light and fluffy, I guess you'd say. Like you stand on it and I've gone ankle deep into it. It's very, very soft. So I'm hoping the floors up above are going to be that light so that we could get a big heavy metal pole and just smash the cast iron flooring through, because it is very rotten. We found lots of bits of the flooring on the ground or around, and it's just crumbly cast iron. So hoping we're going to be able to basically smash it through, or we can figure out a way to cut the cast iron at the wall or pull the cast iron out of the walls and just drop the whole thing. There's nothing at all below which we care about, so if we can just drop the whole thing in and dig it out, then so be it. I said we were going to have a look at the walls back here, so I'm going to swing the lights around and we'll have a look at the walls behind the camera. So Daniel was asking about the opening which we looked through. It's about a metre of reach just to get to the closest section of floors of the pigeon floor, but you wouldn't be able to reach all the way across to the other side. It's a 6.5 metre by 6.5 metre space. So getting something which is going to be heavy enough to damage the floors, enough to drop them, yet able to be, held by hand, or, something the floors will support, is definitely going to be a challenge. Millstones wise, we don't know what's the millstones are like in the enclosures, but there's a little fireplace here which is made of a broken millstone, to give you an idea of the size of it. So these walls have been steamed, but the mortar on here is fairly resilient, and this floor is particularly difficult to clean because we have a lot of steam. We have an awful lot of steam, which means that the building fills up completely with steam, and this floor has no opening. So even if we pull the stuff off the grain hoist, there's virtually nowhere for steam to go, because it can either go upstairs or downstairs. It doesn't really want to go down. We pump it upstairs, the upstairs fills up, at which point there's no more room for steam here. Steam cleaning corners is really difficult because the steam it's very fast moving when it gets, the first meter or so, and then it slows right down. So your corners end up completely full of steam. So they're really difficult to see, sort of steam cleaning blind. But this still looks, and I'm sure it looks terrible to you guys, but it's about 1,000 times better than it was. It was all bubbly vinyl paint. You can still see the vinyl paint up here. This is the vinyl paint coming off. See if I can get a solid piece. Nope, it's just crumbling. The vinyl reacts really well to the steam. Got 160, 180 degree steam. It literally melts the paint. So you end up with these nice little stringy chunks coming off everywhere. And it's basically the molds built up behind it and pushed it out. So you end up with these looks like bubbles on the wall, but it's just mold behind there and fungus, which is awesome. And this whole wall was covered in that. So we've had cement on the wall here, and actually that's a bit which hasn't been cleaned particularly well. So we've had cement on this wall, which means that water can't evaporate out like towards my back, and we can't have water going anywhere. So it all just gets pushed out the sides of the cement, which means that this wall is super wet. The floor I'm standing on is non-existent. The beam ends I'm standing on are non-existent. So we've got plywood here. So again, I can put my foot through the floor because there's no floorboards. And the beam ends here were always wet. Whenever it rained, the beam ends would be soaking wet because the water would run down past the cement, and then that was the easiest way out, was through the floor joint. So they were always sopping wet. They haven't really been so wet since we've removed the cement, which is really, really encouraging. But this is a wall we still have to tackle. So we'll go from this to more like this wall. So this is one which Taryn has been attacking heavily. This, from here to about 3.5 meters away, has taken her 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks of work to clear, because it's got all that modern plaster on the walls, which she mentioned. But this is kind of the point we're trying to get it back to, which is all the surface mortar removed, maybe a tiny bit of the mortar in the joints removed. So say this stone here is set back about a knuckle joint depth from the surface of the stone, but that was all previously filled in with mortar. So we're trying to remove it so we've got bare stone. So once we've got the consents to do the repointing, which is pulling out all of the old mortar and then stuffing in new mortar, and then we'll basically render the wall in lime mortar ready for our insulation board to sit on. We've got it to the point where we can start that process once we have the consent to do so, but we need to get all of this really old mortar and all this old paint off because it's covered in mold and fungus, which is awesome. We're going to have to replace, like I said, all these lintels because they're the sort of thing you can stick your finger into and they're holding up the wall above. which is just fantastic. We've also got some of the old mill works here. This is a chute from the drying floor. So I don't want to open it because it is filled with old bits of bird nest and stuff and probably from rats and things. We haven't got to cleaning these out, but basically you pull that out and it has a chute which comes through. It's all in relatively good condition. Like, it's got loads of holes on it from woodworm, but it's still attached to the roof and it's still attached to the wall, and I can tap on it and my finger doesn't go through. This bottom one is the worst section, but you know, it's for, compared to everything else, it's really good. We're going to be doing away with the chimney because the chimney is a 1980s edition. So the fireplace is going to get dug out because we've got our little shovel here. It's just filled with bird droppings, which is awesome. But we'll probably put like an electric fire in here, which will look like a fire but isn't. There's no trees at all on these islands, really. So firewood is really expensive, coal stinks, and there's no natural gas at all. We have bottled gas if you want to do gas for cooking or whatever. So we don't really want to bring bottled gas piped up here for a fire. Solid fuels are expensive. We bought 2 pallets of chopped firewood for our place where we're staying because it's really cold. It's sub-zero when we had that big storm. It's not very well sealed at all. So we have a fire in there so we could get one room warm with the fire, but that was like £700, which is the same price you'd pay if you were in England. I think it was like £50 delivery for the 2 pallets, which was just unbelievably cheap. Pallets getting across from the mainland to here are like £50 each. So getting 2 pallets delivered from England for £50 is quite a deal. But it's expensive. It's a little bit cheaper than electric, but we don't really want to have a chimney. This building didn't traditionally have a chimney. It had vents in the kiln because the fire would have just gone up through the drying floor and out the roof. So we'll keep somewhat of this feature. We're not sure if this is a historic feature or if this is a more modern 1980s feature. We think this millstone is 1980s, but there may have well been a fire here. We don't know. I don't have any historic pictures from pre-1980s in here, so I have no idea what would have been here traditionally, but it'll make a nice little feature of our lounge room, I guess. Asking about how long the stream. We're planning to end at 2. We're going to see how many people are around, which is in about 40 minutes. So we'll see how many people are around, and we'll go from there, I guess. So the Society for the Preservation of Ancient Buildings, who set up the whole National Mills weekend, are sharing this as well. So we'll see how many people are coming across from there, and if anyone's, mill rights or real mill enthusiast and wants to have a look at anything in detail, we can keep going. If there's someone comes along and wants to look at all the machinery in detail, or tell us about it. But otherwise, we're planning to end at about 2. So as far as the area around the mill, there's a lot of rock. Yeah, there's a lot of rock. The mill sits on bedrock. Out the back, we have bedrock is like 600 mil below the highest sections of the backyard, which you might have seen in previous videos. But behind the building itself, at the normal sort of grade level, it's all of 100 millimeters below the surface. there is bedrock right there. In the kiln, we can hit rock when we're digging it out almost immediately. That's like 20, 30 centimeters down. Haven't tried out the front, but when we go, if you walk towards the shore from here across the field in front of us, there is bedrock like 15 centimeters under the grass. It's the entire island is just a little bit of dirt on top of bedrock. We have an existing septic system out there, which we're not sure of the date. Our next planning application is saying we're using it, but it's just so we can get the planning application in. We're still trying to figure out the treatment is the easy bit. So we've already spec'd out a system which is going to give us really good quality treatment with really clean wastewater coming off that. It's cleaner than what they would class as grey water, which is like stuff from your showers and that, but it still does need to go somewhere. Our yard isn't really big enough. With the rock there, it's definitely a challenge because we were hoping we might be able to fit a percolation area, which is just where the water coming out of the septic system can sit and percolate underground, and bacteria can kill all the nasty stuff, and anything which is in there can basically break down and die before it gets anywhere humans can touch it or any other animals can touch it. But with our rock being right there, we need to have it at least a meter underground, and we don't have a meter underground. So it's a bit of a challenge. We are looking at maybe, if we can't figure out another way to do it, just digging the bedrock out. It's just sandstone. It shears off pretty easily, so you know, a couple of big impact demolition things, we could probably knock the stone out in a couple of weeks doing it by hand, or we could get a digger attached jackhammer, which would make pretty light work of it. We believe there's one on the island which is tractor attachable, and we'll have to see. But the other option is we can also tunnel under the road, extend our way leave, which we've got, because we have in our deeds the right to put septic treatment across the road, but it's literally right next to our neighbour's spring, which they drink from. So it doesn't quite meet modern standards, and we wouldn't really want to have a septic treatment system like 10 meters upstream of their spring. That would not be particularly nice for them, I don't think. Even if it is like super clean effluent, it's still, you know, mentally they're not particularly keen on it, which I completely understand. So we're looking at maybe we could extend that further down the stream so that we're then putting our water out far downstream from them. But it's not, that's the mill wheel outflow sort of channel going over there. So not particularly high flow, but it does go into the ocean very quickly. But we're having to look at options for reed beds. We know who owns the land. They're potentially open to it, but it does have a lot of challenges around it because we still need to have a reed bed for treatment. It will be meters from a coastal area, so a reed bed's probably not going to do very well. There's a lot of challenges around water treatment, a lot of challenges, and it's pretty much the biggest thing we're trying to figure out at the moment is how we do our septic treatment. The treatment plant is fine and easy and we can put it out the back no problem. It's just getting the water which comes out of that to go somewhere, which is the real challenge. Lawrence asking if we're going to use the mill to produce electricity. No, we can't. I said earlier in the stream, probably weren't watching, but that's fine. We don't have water rights. The mill lade isn't on our land, so we have rights to use the mill lade, but we don't own the land the mill lade is on. The water wheel, we would not be able to have any water to get to it. Where the weir is we've had it in previous videos, but that's not actually the weir which controls the water here. That's just a little tiny weir. It's way uphill, and it's a huge water, and there's a massive reservoir wall with the weir on it. And if we were able to get the water rights, which we probably wouldn't because it's owned by a fish farm, which I think they're trying to get going again, so they're probably not going to sell us the rights, we would have to then be liable for and responsible for that weir. So we would have quite a substantial insurance bill, I'd imagine, for that, as well as also having to do the maintenance on it, which is probably out of our means. Hasn't been looked after particularly well for a while, so it's probably going to be tens of thousands of pounds just to make sure it's all tight and secure, just so we could then rebuild the mill lade if we were to get the land, which that was on. So it could be an easy 100,000 plus to spend on getting water here, and we would get 4 kilowatts of actual output from the wheel. So a water wheel running 500,000 litres an hour on a 14-foot wheel would give us about 5.15 kilowatts of power, of mechanical power. But once we've got all the losses of all the bearings and everything and inefficiencies, an electric motor would probably give us about 4 kilowatts, and it might take a lifetime or two to pay that off with the cost it would be to get all that installed. It's just fairly infeasible. As much as we would love to see that wheel working, it's just really impractical. Maybe once we've got everything done, we could put a big pump in and pump water up to the mill lade and over the wheel for like special events like the National Mills Weekend. But that's a long way off. We still need to restore the wheel. As I said earlier, we don't own the land the mill wheel is on. So we don't own the wheel pit. Our land ends at the end of the mill. So the mill sticks out into the neighbouring land, and the mill lade is the border of our land and the next plot of land. So we don't actually own it. It was all one parcel. The mill used to own a substantial amount of the land around it, but over the years, especially from the 1940s onwards, that's all been split off from the mill deed. The mill's been bought and resold so many times to take bits of land off it or the water rights off it over the last 30 years. It's a little bit sad, really. It's just this tiny little plot of land left to it. So we're doing what we can. The land is for sale next door. We're trying to buy it, but we had a valuation of very little for it, and they've put it up at a 30 times what we had the valuation for. And the reality is that's more than the budget we've got for putting all the insulation into the building. So we're going to have to let it slide for now. Hopefully in a year or two's time it'll still be there and we might be able to save up the money for it. But they're wanting basically half what we paid for the mill for a half acre of land next to the mill. And it's just not within our means to take that on. When we've got to finish this building, like getting into this building has to be our priority. We have to be able to live here because it's our house, and we're renting somewhere temporarily on the island, and next summer we may not be able to rent there. It's definitely temporary accommodation, so we need to make all our priority to be here as much as we would want to buy that land. So yeah, that goes on to Bod 9001's question. When do we think we'll be in here? By next summer. It's not so much when we'll be finished, it's when we're going to make it habitable. So we're not, this might be a 5-year project, it might be longer by the time we get everything finished. We've got all the machinery to restore yet. We've got the water wheel to restore. There's tons of work on here, but our goal is to at least have the bottom 2 floors habitable, if not completely finished. So we'll have the kiln, the stairs in the kiln, we'll have bathrooms, we'll have a bedroom. We've got on this floor in the kiln plans for a small guest bedroom in the kiln. And then even if we're sleeping here in the lounge room and our daughter's sleeping in her bedroom in the kiln, we just haven't done the top floor at all. If that meets the minimum standards to make this a residence, then we could move in as long as everything's insulated, but we've got to put all our floor treatments in, got to have new flooring, acoustic insulation between floors to meet building standards. We want to do underfloor heating, so we're going to do electric underfloor heating. Then carpets, walls need to have all the lime mortar on them, which will be a render, which will then be what our wood board insulation attaches to, which then has a services cavity on it for our electrics and stuff. So, you know, we've got a fair bit of work to do, but it doesn't have to be all painted and, you know, all the mill machinery restored by the time we get in here. We can definitely make do in the meantime. So it might be 5+ years before we're finished, but habitable we're hoping next year. This might be one for go. So James is asking, what's your origin story? How did you choose this part of the world and this mill? How do you know about this building? You want to answer that one? Okay.
Hi. Yeah, so our origin story. Wow. That's a long one.
I don't need to get too deep into it.
No, I won't get too deep into it. I was born in South Africa and Mark's Australian, and basically we always liked to travel, so we went to Canada first, and then we came here, and when we came here we loved all the old buildings. It was so sad to see so many of them being derelict, and so it became our task to find an old building that we could do up. And basically we came across this one just by looking in every website, every auction, every sort of website that was to do with buildings at risk, and then we sort of looked into them, saw what was for sale, what wasn't for sale we might be able to talk to the owner about. And we came across this mill because we were looking on the for sales, and we both found the same one at different times, but we both just missed it initially because it was so far away. But then once we looked at it, we realized that this was very much what we were looking for, and basically that's how we ended up in Orkney. The house kind of, we're pretty happy with wherever we were moving to, but it's up here, it's really beautiful, just the countryside and the sea, and it's just the different kind of lifestyle, which was really, really nice to experience. So yeah, that's pretty much how we ended up in Scotland. But we had been planning to end up in Scotland.
Also, Scotland, as far as the government goes, has really got it together as far as the derelict buildings and abandoned buildings.
And looking through them and searching them. And
so they have Historic Environment Scotland have the Buildings at Risk Register, which if you're ever looking for a derelict property is absolutely worth looking at. It's got some just all the listed buildings, and even unlisted buildings, which are
at risk.
Yeah, they're abandoned. They're at risk of not being usable anymore, or
and
they're past being usable.
And it makes a mention of what listing they are. It makes a mention of which council person or which council is connected to that building, and it sometimes even has a phone number you can call, so that you can call up about that particular building and say what's the current status of it. And then you can find out who owns it through it sometimes will say, and also
the Registers of Scotland, which you can go on now and just look at the Registers of Scotland and basically look at any parcel of land in Scotland and see its sales history.
Who owns it? Yeah.
You can buy the deed for I think £3, £3.50
Yeah,
or something, including VAT. So it's really cheap to buy the deed for it, which will give you the name of the person who currently owns it. which might allow you to track them down. So there have been properties we've seen in the past which we found on the buildings at risk register.
Yep.
We've really liked the look of, heavily investigated buying, managed to find who currently owns it. Like we've had to go through, like some of them had history, and we've gone and done the whole basic genealogy to try and figure out who owns it.
Yeah.
Like huge amounts of research into the family to figure out who the owners are,
Yeah.
who currently owns it. And then the Register of Scotland finally got back to us with the deed and confirmed it, which is great.
Yeah.
But they were not looking to sell, and that was going to be a really expensive project.
Yeah, that was more than this one. So yeah.
And the nice thing about this one, we both independently found it.
Yeah.
Because you hear a lot of, you look at like Restoration Man and other TV shows like that, and sometimes it's like one person
really wants to do
the
it,
project,
and the other person doesn't.
sort of
Yeah.
dragged along for the ride. But we both found this independently. We really like the restoration shows and like the really historic ones as well.
Or the ones that get your hands dirty, kind of.
Yeah, and we love the Watermill ones.
Yeah.
So we both found this independently, which was awesome, and both thought that the other person wouldn't want to live in such a remote area. But we researched the area. In the first video we posted, we bought this without seeing it. We bought it without coming up here. With COVID, we couldn't. Wasn't really a valid reason to come up, so it wasn't worth the travel.
And there are enough people here to look at it that could tell us about it and take photos and videos that it wouldn't have made any difference whether we were here or not. It's the same thing.
It's a rundown building full of junk.
There's not really hidden problems. The problems are very obvious.
It's not like when you're buying a house and you find out there's a crack in the wall or something. It's like, no, it's really obvious. All the issues.
Well, that's the other thing, is you can easily get to the stone. You can not. Yeah. It's like you don't have to strip stuff back to find it, to see the problem. Yeah, it's all.
We were living in a house in England, which we rented for 9 months, which the owners went and the owner retired from the Air Force, so they wanted to go back and live there, so we had to leave. And they were going to spend £70,000 on the restoration. Now, it was probably worth, because of the condition it was in, all the floors creaked, the banisters, were basically set up for a Hollywood stunt or something.
Yeah.
Like you lean on them too hard and you go flying off. The wall, one of the walls had a big crack through it from settlement. The roof had a couple of holes in it. They weren't terrible, they weren't leaking, but squirrels had been in there in the past. We'd heard from the neighbours, and it was just run down. Yep. It needed some love. It had been a rental property for ages, and for the amount of money they were spending on it, they were going to end up with a property. If you take the current value of the property, put the money you're going to invest into it to make it, redo all the kitchens and all the bathrooms and everything, you're going to end up spending way more than if you just sold it and bought another property. The amount of money which had to be spent on it was just so much more. The amount of work isn't really that much more than
with this one,
taking derelicts.
Well, the thing about the very derelict ones is that the interiors are usually stripped out and all that, so you don't have to go and
sometimes
strip it all out.
Taken off.
You don't have to strip it all out, and then it's like basically also with a lot of the buildings is you can't build stone buildings anymore. It's just way too expensive.
So much labour.
And so much labour that it's just not feasible. But if you buy just the stone structure, even if you took the stones down and built anew using those stones, it's still you've got the resources. So for this one, it's the exterior structure, and then you basically building a new building inside an old building, and then that all the electrics are going to be fine because it's all new.
And we've looked at properties which have had no roofs, no floors, just walls or even parts of walls. Because with the way planning works in all of the UK, if you buy, say, a plot of farmland, but it's not in the council's plan, which they do most councils do a 5-year plan saying where they're going to allow housing and how they're going to grow their areas, they will have in there areas where they won't really allow any housing. But if you've got some sort of building, even if it was a 3-story building and you've only got the first floor left, it can be a way that you can bypass the planning regulations, because there has been a property there in the past. The more of the property which you're putting back into use, the better. But if you've got a property which has been out of use, even if it's 100 years out of use, but you want to put it back into use, you can bypass a lot of that. As far as building a new house, you would never get permission to build a new house there. So it can be a way to get land relatively cheap, which you can probably build on.
More likely to be able to build on.
Than if you just bought a piece of farmland. So the mill cost us about what it would have cost us to buy a plot of land. But we've got this wonderful building kit, which comes with all the walls all set up. We have to fix the roof, so we have to take the roof off and put it back on. But
we would have had to build a new roof anyway if we bought.
Yeah, if we'd bought a property, it's just we've got to do one step more before. But we've got a large amount of the timbers already here. Like all of this floor's timbers are good to go. Basically, we need to put new joints on them, but we save a lot of money on that.
Well, one of the things you have to take into consideration when you look at old buildings is that their walls are very thick. So there was one building that we found. We weren't really interested. We weren't going to buy it, but we thought it was fascinating. It was a castle, but it was more like a 14th century tower castle thing that was for sale. But then we actually did the maths, and
you'd struggled to build a 3-bedroom house.
Because the walls were like 1.5 meters thick.
Yeah, it's 1.5 meters thick walls.
So then you lost all this space.
This sort of and it looks like this great big property, and then you go inside and it's like, oh, that's like a 3 meter by 2 meter room left inside.
You'd have to have a room per floor.
It was like the main tower, you would have 1 bedroom per floor. And that was the only way you could
make it work. So
but it's like what, 80,000? 100,000?
It was 130.
Was it? Okay.
It was 130,000 pounds
for this tower, but it also didn't come with much land at all. So same thing with this property. It just didn't come with any land.
But that was an interesting. It's really interesting researching.
It's really fun researching that.
And the one website which has auctions, Scottish auctions, we found that had an island for sale.
Oh
recently.
Whole island. Yeah, you could buy a whole island.
But it went for way more than it was up for.
But that was recently though.
It's really interesting. I still keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's another thing. We've been watching the auctions because it's typically going to be the cheapest way to buy a derelict is through an auction.
And Church of Scotland sales as well.
Is that vacuum cleaner still outside?
Yes. It was really rainy. You can smell it in here.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I can smell the rain.
We're going to finish off now?
Soon. So we're looking at the auctions, and it's been really interesting, especially with coronavirus, looking at the auctions, because they were still doing all the online auctions.
But you couldn't go see anything.
No.
I mean,
we had those churches, like the Lead Hills Church and the other church.
And jump on them if you see them for a cheap price, because suddenly people will realise that they've been there for a really long time, and then everyone wants to get on the auction.
We'd been saying they're like 15,000 or something for a starting bid, and we'd been debating whether we wanted to live there, but it was in a really historic lead mining area, and we weren't sure about what having a tiny human, what it would be like living in an area which has got potentially lots of lead contamination. We couldn't go and find out about it down in the Scottish borders, and that was just. It must have been up there for months at like 15,000.
And then suddenly everybody was interested in it.
And then it went for like 80,000 pounds or something. And there were 2 churches in a sort of similar area which had just one weekend just went absolutely
crazy.
Nuts. So it can be really.
The church is another really good one because they're usually in really good condition.
Yeah, the Church of Scotland.
And the price is really good because nobody can use them, and you'll definitely most likely get it into a residential because they're not going to use it as a church.
Very difficult to convert, but you can get some really stunning
interesting buildings
in the process. There's one of the reasons we jumped on this without having seen it was because the price was really within our budget. We've looked at and researched a lot of derelicts. I think a month earlier we'd looked at that mill in Aberdeen, which had burned down. So it was a burnt down mill which had been derelict for 5 years after it had burned down. It was quite substantial, but it went for 90,000, and which is more than we would have had to spend more money on it than we would have to spend on this one. Because that wasn't part of the roof. That would have blown.
But also slightly bigger, I think.
It was bigger.
It was a bigger. Had 2 buildings.
You could have done more with it, but only if you had the money to do that.
To do that. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, that's what the research is you got to really research
Yeah.
to the
But I
hills.
think after the amount of research we've done on all the properties we've been at, we've got to the point that
You could pretty much
we can
look
look
at it.
something and figure it out pretty
That's it, yeah.
quickly.
Okay. All right. Anyone else comment?
Nothing. What's it like being away from stuff like local shops? Do you miss next day deliveries?
Yeah, we rely a lot on next day deliveries, but you just work around it. You ask the locals for all the helpful advice they have to give you, and that's really useful.
Yeah,
And
because we go to the mainland for our grocery shop every 2 weeks because it is a day trip.
I mean, you can do online stuff, but we're just trying to get
Amazon
ourselves
takes
settled.
A week and a half, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks. Like when there was all that bad weather, none of the ships were sailing up here, and none of the ferries were crossing over. So that made things take about 3 weeks because of all the backlog.
But you also
But we can also get deliveries
Yeah.
from the mainland to here.
Yeah.
There's a local guy who does all of our parcel deliveries here. So if anything comes by courier, it comes through him. So he gets it from the depot on the mainland. Postal service is great. Royal Mail, fantastic. So Royal Mail delivers here every day except Sunday. And they're way quicker than all the couriers. So your main couriers in the UK are DPD, really, Hermes, but UPS and FedEx and DHL all come through the same depot.
I think the main thing that you're aware of is you can't get food deliveries.
Yeah, you can't get,
No, deliver McDonald's or that sort of stuff.
well, we
So
didn't do that.
I know, no, don't do that. But I'm just saying for
I don't
anyone
think
else.
there even is anything else.
It's like, oh no, you can't just order a pizza.
No, you can't order a pizza.
You make a pizza.
We in the last place we were living in when we were renting, we got our groceries delivered. We didn't leave the house really at all.
Yeah, but even when we were there, we were in the country. The delivery places didn't deliver there, so it's like, what's your postal area? It's
we
like,
were in a small village, but we were half an hour's drive from multiple major shopping brands. But
you just do things more in bulk.
Yeah,
like you don't just.
But it's
drips
really
and drabs.
annoying when you get back and you're like, I forgot whatever it was. It's like,
and you're like, oh well, next week.
2 weeks without that then. But we've for our daughters, we both independently shop for that, so we've got so much extra.
Yeah, we've got
food
so
for
much
her.
extra stuff for her. So yeah, if stuff can keep, then you just get lots of it.
Yeah, we have loads of excess of stuff which keeps.
Which is why in the mill we're going to have
so
2
we're going
fridges.
to do an extension out the back, which will be our pantry, and we can put a chest freezer. And because the place we're staying in had a fridge already, we brought our fridge with us, so we've got 2 fridges and 2 freezers, more importantly, so we can freeze all our meats and stuff.
Yeah, it's just planning really.
Yeah, and remembering to get the meat out of the freezer.
And realizing that you don't actually need most of the stuff you want to get.
Yeah,
Or
because a lot of the stuff like Screwfix deliver via Royal Mail, so that's our main sort of place where we buy tools and stuff. And yeah, it's manageable. But I mean, when we lived in Canada and especially in Australia, you don't have that next day delivery. It's like the same sort of deal as here, just because the countries are really big. So it's kind of just a step back towards that. There is a little shop on the island, which carries some
But very
stuff.
much a little shop on the island.
But it's nice that, if you're really desperate for something, you can maybe get it there.
We have a question from Bobby. He was asking about citizenship in the UK. Now, this one's interesting because through Mark's mother, because she's still British, she didn't sort of cancel her citizenship. So
I'm a British citizen.
So he's a British citizen by descent.
And then because our daughter was born in the UK,
she's British.
My citizenship passes to her. If she'd been born outside the UK, she wouldn't have got it.
And then for me,
You're on an ancestry visa.
I'm on an ancestry visa when it comes to the UK. It's very confusing because I'm got Australian citizenship, and I think I may still have my South African citizenship. I'm not sure. And then, I'm on an ancestry visa, but we're going to be looking at to do with spousal stuff. So the main thing is to just research, and when it comes to citizen stuff, get a professional, because when we talk to them, they say that like if 90% of the people they put, or more, they put through will get through with the citizenship, because if there's any problems, they'll let you know. But if you do it on your own, they say majority of people don't get accepted simply because they don't know what they're doing.
Really awkward.
Yeah.
Like even just when we were applying for our work permits in Canada, and even when you're doing an ancestry visa, like some of the questions can be really ambiguous.
Yeah.
Really, really ambiguous, which is a really easy way to get your application rejected.
Yeah, so that's why go through a professional. It's
the
worth it.
They're
Absolutely.
not that expensive, so very easy to do.
They're definitely worth
Someone
it.
was asking how high the ceilings are. Well, this one's about 2.2 meters, I think.
Yeah.
And the ones downstairs are about 2.5 meters.
Yeah.
And upstairs,
We're going to be lifting it
we'll
up a bit.
have some, at the walls, it's 1.7
Yeah,
meters. It's currently 1.7 meters from the floor beam, so from one of these beams to where the rafter hits the wall. So that will be coming in a bit, so probably about 1.6 meters at the wall, but then we've got a 41-degree rafter going up.
And then the beams going across are going to be higher than they are now.
The actual ties at the top will be, I think, at about 2.6 meters, because we have to lift those because the roof lights we've got, the roof windows we've got are larger than the current ones, so we have to move the roof ties for that.
That's the other bonus of having an old industrial building, because the roofs are generally higher, whereas like when you know lots of people in England, the roofs aren't just not high, they literally have a beam like in your face as you're trying to walk across the hallway.
Yeah,
so you
like
have
the
to
house we're staying in now, and I go out the back window and I smack my forehead into it every time.
No, but that's just a small door, a really small door, even it comes to here.
There's plenty of houses which that is the doorway, and you are absolutely fine. And I
I'm
keep
just
smacking my
fine.
face into.
But yeah, so that's one nice thing about churches and industrial buildings, is that their roofs are higher for when you want to convert stuff, and you get to decide where you want the.
Yeah, and on the industrial building side of things, like these floors, in a lot of older buildings, the floors, the beams would not have been quite so
heavy?
Substantial.
Yeah.
But these floors are built for handling, several tons of machinery.
And all the bags of grain
and so
everything.
upstairs you would have had tons and tons of grain on the floor.
Yeah.
So the floor loadings are very favourable, because modern houses have a lot of crap in them. A lot of furniture, a lot of stuff which historically they wouldn't have had. So we've got a lot more heavy furniture, a lot more heavy beds, a lot more computers and desks and all sorts of stuff sitting on floors, creating really high point loads which you wouldn't have had previously. And the structural engineer, when I wanted to say, I'll have to go and check all the floor joists are going to be sufficient to meet modern standards. He's like, yeah, you're fine.
Yeah. Well, that's the other interesting thing about historical.
These are huge. These are 75 by, no, these are 80 millimeters by 250 millimeters. Like these are, as far as construction lumber goes, these are in the oversized category.
They're overkill almost with this, which is really
overkill,
good. Yeah.
Which is great for the future of the building.
Yeah. I mean, it's been here for. I mean, we were here in one of the storms. It wasn't even that much into the winter, and I was like, I'm so much more impressed with this building. Like all the buildings on the island, just how they withstand the constant hammering from the storms. Is just, I mean, never mind the sheep being out in the field, and like, how did they survive it? And that's crazy. So these houses are pretty impressive.
Yeah, at the end of the 1 month update video, we've got some footage of the wind driving the water into the cliffs, and like the splashes don't look that impressive in the video.
They are.
But that's 2.5 kilometers away. I'm filming that, and those splashes are as high as a 14-story building. So you imagine like on a coast, having a 14-story building sitting on the coast and having waves splashing up
Yeah.
over it. It's really interesting.
Where's that?
When I was filming that, I got out of the car and my glasses got blown off my face and crossed the road entirely without hitting the ground. It's 100-mile-per-hour winds at the top of that hill, easy. And our weather station was only measuring 60, but we're relatively sheltered here.
Oh, did we mention? Have we mentioned what we're planning on doing with the grain hoist?
Nope.
Oh, so the grain hoist is all wood.
Well,
It's
left
not
of it.
what's left of it, but at the moment, and it was historically wood. But what we're looking at doing, we still obviously have to go through all the planning, but of turning it into a wood frame, but with.
Well, it'll be sitting on steel.
Yeah,
so
on steel
we'll have
and
steel
wood.
beams attached
Yeah.
to the walls somehow. We're still figuring that out.
And then have glass, so that you'll be able to. I don't know what we'll be able to fit in there, but that you can that you can go in there and then see around, and that's basically looking out to the
180
sea.
degrees.
Yeah, those should be really nice,
Amazing.
especially when it's stormy outside.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
And
It's all storming and blasting,
and
you're
you're
all
just standing.
cozy and just watching the waves.
Yeah.
The waves are so impressive.
And you will
the
have
ocean is
two
so
stories
impressive.
of that. So we have this story, this floor, and then the next floor up, which is
A whole party of people come and stand and watch.
watch the storms. Yeah.
And also we'll be able to put like a telescope in there because in winter it gets dark at 3 in the afternoon, and so we're hoping.
Or
we'll be able to get some-
binoculars for the birds and
There's
so
lots of cool birds.
lots
out
of
here.
birds, yeah.
But I'm hoping we might be able to get a clear night because when we're up here in December there was just overcast the entire time.
which I think is probably most of the time.
If we can get a clear night in winter, which isn't 100-mile-per-hour winds, we should get a really great view of the stars. Because if you look like a dark sky map, like this is the darkest it is in the UK here.
Yeah.
There's not much in the way of lights at all, and we're also far enough north that we should be able to see the aurora if it is a active aurora.
Active, yeah.
Like really active. So. Because we're way further north than we were when we were in Canada, and we've seen the aurora in Canada, so it should be pretty cool. But at this time of year, I left here at 11:30 last night, but it was still a little bit of sunlight. But even at like 9 or 10 p.m., it's still pretty light out there at the moment.
And then
it will by the time we get to the solstice.
Yeah, then it's basically twilight only, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
The sun rises at 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah, there is no real night. It's quite difficult with the little one to say, go to sleep. It's like, night.
Yeah, we have her window completely covered in cardboard. Because she doesn't want to go to sleep, and then she's waking up earlier and earlier every day.
Yeah, so I have to get used to that.
It's not great when she's got her molars coming in and doesn't want to sleep anyway.
Teething, yeah. But yeah.
Poppy Jenkins is saying a little observation pod nook. That'd be amazing to just chill out in. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking that we could have it as a, like if we could fit like an arm, not like a small armchair, not the big ones, that you can just sit there and read. I think would be really nice. Especially on this the upper floor, you would have it that the hallway would come across the mill and then turn towards the grain hoist, and then you could have that little bit place to read and sit and read, and then you would turn off that hallway into the different bedrooms. So that would be a really nice sort of thing to do.
Can you remind us how old the walls are?
Sorry?
How old the walls are?
Well, I think the stone walls are
originally
1776.
Six. Yeah.
Or 1777, I'm not sure.
One of the two.
But yeah, that's where the walls are, but I think the wood is
The wood's newer.
the
So
80s, yeah.
The section we're in now, the walls will be 1776-ish. The stone itself is probably several million years older than that. But the kiln was originally smaller. I don't know how much smaller. I don't know if this was just a perfectly rectangular building, but it was expanded in 1860 something.
Either 1860s or 1880s.
I think it's the 1860s they expanded the kiln.
Okay. All right.
We've got
Two
plaques on
plaques,
the walls
yeah.
which have multiple dates in the 1800s, and then the 1937 date, and then the 1700s date, which
Yep.
is really cool. I'm hoping we can put one of our own, a 2021 up there
Yep.
while we're doing the roof. And so yeah, the walls are 1776 here. Then they expanded the grain hoist in the mid 1800s as the demand for it increased. A lot of the farms on the island used to have their own watermills. If you look really closely, you can find mill lathes and even some wheels still on buildings where they would have just ground the grain for their feed for their livestock, whereas this was grinding the flour and meal for humans.
Yep.
So much higher quality grain with
And
much larger wheels.
Yeah, and more of
much
it.
more machinery.
Yep.
And so farmers would have had their own kilns on their properties, but from what we understand is the process sort of started to change. It was more efficient to just dry the grain all in one place, or maybe farmers realized it was just too much effort to go and turn the grain all day, or have someone doing that when you could just send it here and have it dried.
Yeah.
So they made the kiln bigger so they could do more drying of grain, and so that got expanded out. So it's interesting, the archway downstairs looks kind of weird because it's off to one side, but it's actually perfectly centered in the kiln.
Yeah.
Whereas the fireplace here is perfectly centered in this building, and the same with the kiln opening upstairs.
Yeah.
It's perfectly centered in this part of the building.
Yeah.
So you can see that expansion.
Yeah, so it's got a bit of every era in it, which is it's really interesting. So that's what's nice about our place in it, is that then we're adding our century sort of part to it, and then in the next century, the next person could add next more, and it just keeps going.
So it's about 250 years old. We've had comments on previous videos and posts on Imager and stuff saying, "Oh, but that's not 1770s." It's like, well,
that's not 1770s, so.
Okay, but
they're living.
Machinery, it's an industrial building. You don't just like build an industrial plant and then just say, well, we're not upgrading it. The cast iron stuff down there is probably 1800s.
But there are living buildings, so they slowly grow.
The machinery, all the gears and iron stuff is probably mid 1800s, if not late 1800s.
Because that probably would have all been wood, as you said.
I don't know.
Yeah, well,
but it would have been upgraded as more modern equipment came about, because these mills were built basically mail order. So from what we've been told, there's at least 4 other mills of this style in the area, not on our island, but on other islands. But they're all 100 years newer, so they're slightly different looks. So you get really confused when we're looking at pictures of this building before we bought it. You're like, oh, doesn't quite look right.
Yeah, it's not quite the same.
You're looking for pictures, and so we found half the mills around is because they look very similar, but not quite.
Not quite the same, yeah.
And it's because these were all from a company in Edinburgh, and basically you got a mail order catalogue, and you'd say, I'll take that one, and all the woodwork would have been done in Edinburgh in a factory, and I don't know about the walls, but I assume someone would have built them to spec here from local material, because this is local sandstone.
Yep.
And then they would have come up and put all the materials
wood in it,
from a kit, basically, which was pretty impressive that, that's back in the 1700s they were doing that. So the other mills are all at least 100 years newer. Some are 90 years newer, but they're the newer model of this, and you can see the improvements. So they don't have the grain hoist sticking outside. They have the grain hoist on the inside, so you can load the grain out of the rain, which makes a lot of sense.
And that's also the other reason why the road is so close.
Yeah, so we've got hatches. I can't show you because there's bright lights on it, but we've got a hatch here, and we've got a hatch directly below it. So they could have hoisted the grain up on the inside.
Yeah.
Or it may have been they had ladders up here, because these stairs are not original, and there was definitely no stairs in here before, so they may have just had ladders
to climb up and down here.
The floors. And then the grain hoist opens as well, so you can winch up through it. It's a pretty interesting sort of finding that these are not like built to spec. They were built to order.
Yeah.
And yeah, very generic. So we're really excited after restrictions get lifted. One of the other mills, which is of this style but newer, is still operating. They have a miller. They grind flour every winter. It's a tourist attraction in summer where they do grind, but only just for basically showing people how the historic mills would have worked.
And we can have a look and see what bits of machinery we have missing.
Learn more from the miller about it. We'd hoped to go and visit in December, but because we hadn't been up here for more than a few days, and his wife's was shielding.
Higher risk, yeah.
So we completely understand that we weren't able to go over there, but we will at some point go over and be able to show what this would have looked like with all the wheels running and
Originally,
all the machinery going, because the wheel setup is identical to this.
Yeah.
Some of the machinery is different, but it's very similar, which is going to be really awesome to be able to show
really
everyone.
interesting to see, yeah.
And find out more. We really want to find out more. Walls built in the year of the U.S. Declaration of Independence.
Yep, no. That's always the thing, 7076. I know, it's astounding to get your mind around that.
And that's another nice thing about, I think a lot of Brits generally don't, they've always had this history. You can find plenty of houses
that are
built
old.
in the 1400s or 1300s even.
Yeah.
And for us being able to own effectively a building which is older than all the countries we've lived in combined is we love the history, we love the heritage of it.
And to help preserve some of this, because it's really sad to see how many of the buildings, not because you're not allowed to demolish things without permission, but you can, what I call the wrecking ball of time, which is basically just let stuff sit. And then it just gets worse and worse, and then it just falls down. It's a bit like this building, where even if you wait just a couple more years from this one, it would be in a really sorry state, more than it is now. Because
the windows weren't boarded up.
Yeah.
The wood is all disintegrating. Once the floors start falling through, the machinery
then it would
falls
just
through,
be
and that's it. And we were looking at some properties, was it in the Lake District?
Yep.
When we were looking for a rental, and it's it'd be like there's just derelicts everywhere.
Everywhere.
You look. Everywhere you look, there's a derelict building.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same up here, but this is for different reasons. But in those conservation areas, we're talking to the real estate agent, he says, well, you can buy one, but there's no way you'll get permission to do anything, because they're so set on preserving the heritage that it becomes such an insurmountable obstacle to do anything with them, because they want everything done a specific way or whatever. So these buildings are going from slightly derelict to
very derelict,
just utter ruins, because nobody's being allowed to do anything with them because they might do something wrong. And there's definitely a lot of buildings which have had a lot of
bad stuff done to them. Yeah.
We've got all the cement and stuff. We can see the effect of just 20 years, 30 years of cement on patches of walls, never mind the entire walls. And, but it's...
So you've got to give a little...
That's where Scotland has been better, again, going back to saying Scotland is better at dealing with this historic stuff. A lot of the English things, we hear a lot more negative things about getting stuff done in England, which makes it a lot more of a challenge. So,
but even with some of the buildings, it's like with one of the buildings we were looking at getting, that even if it turned out we couldn't restore the whole building, it was like two buildings in one, that you try and preserve what it is as is, because the one that we were looking at, if it got left any longer, the whole thing would have fallen down.
Yeah,
so it won't even look like it does now.
Yeah,
it won't even look like it does now. It will be gone. So even if you just preserve the ruin for preserving the ruin,
There's one of the ones which got stripped in the 1960s when they brought in all the roof or window taxes or whatever, and they took the roof off.
They took everything
this
out.
Mansion, it's like this beautiful stately home, wasn't even really 100 years old at the time. And
they stripped everything.
They stripped all the roof off, stripped all the floors out. It has all iron, I-beam, lintels and supports for a lot of the stone. And they all look like just sheets of paper. They're so rotten and delaminated.
And then when they go,
and once they go,
the whole thing's going down.
It's just gorgeous ashless stone. It probably cost £50,000 to get all new beams put in. But you know,
if you could save just the because it's a gorgeous ruin on its own. Yeah.
And it's on the buildings at risk register.
Yeah.
Both of the buildings are on the buildings at risk register, and it's a pretty incredible piece of history. But in 5 years' time, though, a couple of those lintels will fail, and
then it'll be gone.
Once that fails, the walls fall down, and at that point, it's really far beyond anyone saving it.
Yeah.
Which is really sad because it's a gorgeous building. Even as a ruin, it's a gorgeous building. If you know, someone was just there making sure that the trees which are growing within it don't, you know,
fall over,
damage things too much, and take some of the smaller trees off the walls and stop some of the vines growing on it and replace those lintels. I mean, that building could still be standing there for
a couple of more hundred years.
Yeah, another 100 years or so without really looking that old. But you know, the way it stands and with the current owners, it's not going to have anything done. So it'll be another building lost to time. But you know, there's nothing the council can do about it
because they don't own it. So no, it's an interesting conundrum with That's from all our research of looking at so many historic buildings over the last year. Any more questions?
Yeah, Fluffy Jing say, if you go see the mill, can you video it for us? Yep, we're absolutely going to be videoing it and hopefully comparing it to
this one,
what we've got, so we can show ours versus...
And also the historical side, like theirs being the 1800s, ours being the 1700s, and how they adapted this one to work versus built it exactly
so the other one is owned by a historic trust, so we're hoping we're going to be able to give them some exposure as well, and also be able to, like, perhaps interview the miller to talk about milling and the history side of things. Don't do that
one. So you're saying putting in any guilty pleasure modern thing? I don't know.
Heated floors.
Heated floors, yes. We're putting in heated floors.
As far as like doing things to the building, though, I guess we're putting that doorway into the extension.
No, they're thinking something that specifically modern that we're going to add to it. And
showers.
Yeah.
Indoor plumbing.
Indoor plumbing, yeah. Indoor plumbing showers.
They only hit this island. They've only got indoor plumbing really on this island in the 1950s.
So no, what else? I'm trying to think what.
Lighting.
Yeah.
It got electric lights, 12-volt electric lights in the 1940s. So we're going to go with 240 volts.
So I think the heated floors and the heating inside is going to be one of the major things, and then I think.
No, we're trying to keep
keep en suites and things as well.
Yeah, but with what we're doing, we're trying to keep things historically appropriate. So all of our walls, we've designed the whole stack up to be vapor permeable. The floors, underfloor heating is a little bit.
Yeah, we're not really putting in like a sauna modern, or a what do you call it? What are those? A spa floors outside. No, we're not really doing that.
A hot tub thing.
We're not doing any of those sorts of things.
No, we're trying to keep things fairly much not put too many holes in the walls or. Yeah,
we're trying to do as little as possible. Yeah, just so that we're not like, for example, the way they wanted to do it is if they had to strip everything out, that there would be the least amount of damage, long-term damage to the building itself. So that's why you're kind of building onto the walls rather than into the walls.
So we're definitely trying to take the conservation approach to it rather than just going all out modern, putting damp-proof membranes on everything and trying to treat it like a modern building. It's very much trying to treat it as a historic building.
With its own problems,
the materials which make it so that moisture can move through the walls as they're meant to move through the walls. so we don't have all these mold problems. Because we've seen just in the last few days with the amount of moisture we've put into the building, that it can deal with the moisture even with all the cement pointing outside. It just needs
somewhere to go. Yeah, it needs somewhere to go.
So no, I don't think we're doing too much in the way of like guilty pleasure modern stuff. Actually, no, I'm going to put 10 gigabit fiber throughout the whole building. I guess that would be my that's my guilty pleasure, because I work from home. So above here will be my home office, and then down in the kiln we'll have the utility room, which will probably have some rack-mounted servers and all the fiber termination.
Yeah, so that's probably the internet side.
We'll have 10 gigabit fiber running throughout the entire building. I mean, the people who we got internet through last night here, finally, they've said, we're using Ubiquiti gear. We could do Ubiquiti air fiber back to them if we wanted to. If we wanted to pay for it, we could get gigabit fiber. It'll be ISP cost fiber, not your domestic installation £60 a month fiber. It'd be very expensive, but if we wanted to, we could. It's I think 6 air fiber hops away from the actual glass fiber termination, but we can get some modern conveniences up here, and if the stuff I'm doing for work needs more data, I can get more data.
Get it from somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, I think running fiber optic cables throughout the entire.
I think that's
building.
I think that's one of the things about being living sort of not off the grid, but sort of in very, very remote places. That now, as long as you can get internet somewhere, that used to be one of the main barriers to people.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't do work. Now, if you work from home and you need the internet, then you can figure out a way to.
And we're also pre-registered for Starlink. So if Starlink is looking promising this far north, they're saying next year for here, but we're right on the northern edge of sort of where the planned service is going to be. So we've got some internet now. So I guess we'll have to see how Starlink is going up here, as it's a fairly substantial cost to get the unit. But it'd be cool to have. I love what SpaceX are doing.
Yes. Yes.
I like rocketry.
Yes, he does.
You've even flown supersonic rockets.
I know.
You've built and flown supersonic rockets.
I know, but I wouldn't have been able to do it by myself.
You're clever.
Yes.
And also, I kind of want to do a whole house UPS. So if we lose power, we'll have battery backup for the whole house.
Yeah, so that because if we have an electric stove and stuff, then if the power goes out, then you want to be able to cook.
We're planning to go with gas stoves.
Yeah.
So we'll probably go with. We've heard that maybe once a year or so you can lose power for a couple of days. We definitely have power interruptions here. We've had, I think, 2 so far today.
Yep.
They're just brief. They make the UPSs kick on. The lights dim for a fraction of a second, but then it's back to normal. Which I don't really understand, because we have far more wind power getting generated on this island than is being consumed. There's a 900 kilowatt turbine up on the hill, which sits curtailed the vast majority of the time because they can't export the power. There's dozens, if not hundreds, of 5 to 15 kilowatt turbines around the island.
Yeah.
So I don't get why we could possibly lose power, because we don't need
it's probably
power
the connection,
from the mainland,
not the extra power.
But the substation trips out occasionally or something. So we'll, guilty pleasure-wise, maybe we'll have whole house UPS. So with maybe generator backup, treat the place like a data center. We'll see. We'll see how. That's a much later down the line plan.
We're not really thinking about that far.
This year.
That's the main thing, is don't think too far ahead. Don't imagine yourself in the finished building, because
dreaming about what you could do.
It's not even that's still I don't even think about that being a realistic. That's just like a dream. It's just because you've got to do step by step. Otherwise, it's too overwhelming when you think about, oh my gosh, if I'm going to have a TV there, I'm going to have electrics coming from there, and then it's going to have to go from there, and it's just too much to get your head around. The only thing that I really think about is, how are we going to fit the kitchen table in this space? And that's about it. Yeah.
He's saying that they got the impression I'm an electrical, no, I'm an electronics engineer. And yeah, as far as technology stuff goes, yeah, you could do all the home automation stuff, but now all of that is pretty much, you can do offline stuff, but so much of the automation stuff is tied into cloud services, and I'm just not that comfortable with Amazon or Google or Apple or whoever you choose to go with recording every conversation in the house. So I'm not particularly keen on sending every bit of audio which comes through the house off to some cloud service, because you don't know who's intercepting on the way, you don't know what they're doing with it. There's definitely some of the companies which are taking that data have been caught out doing things they really shouldn't be doing with that data. So yeah, I don't think we're going to go too heavily into the home automation side of things. I don't see the need to be able to say, ask something to turn on the lights, because, you know, light switches have always worked for me. I might sound like a terrible electronics engineer at the moment, but, and yeah, I know there's offline things you can do with Raspberry Pis and, you know, voice processing libraries and all the rest, but it's not that big of a building. It's really not. There's not that much you could do as far as, you know, cool smart electronics or anything. I mean, a third of the building's taken up with mill machinery. So yeah, I think, you know, having fibre to every room is probably going to be it. So we've got 10 gigabit for video editing. The cameras we've got are doing sort of 300 to 500 megabytes a second of data, so it's 4.3 gigabit per second, 2.8 to 4.3 gigabit a second. So yeah, we need to have sort of 10 gig if we want to have the files stored on a NAS somewhere not right next to me, and the files are just too big to have on, you know, I've got 30 terabytes of storage in my main editing computer of mechanical disks, and it's just too slow. So yeah, we want to have high-speed fiber throughout the building. I work in electronics marketing, so I'm generally creating lots of demo projects and sample projects for software companies to demonstrate their software and show off cool things about different integrated circuits and ways things work. Lots of projects to help students out. So yeah, I use a lot of stuff on servers and networks, and we have like 2 or 3 servers in the house usually. So having dedicated fiber throughout the property would be nice. And if we can get, you know, even the 40 megabit internet we've got is still more than our average consumption. Our average consumption is about 15-20 megabit continuous, with, you know, streaming stuff for our daughter and streaming stuff for us. So having gigabit fiber would be really cool, but for the price, probably not really going to do all that much for us. The file sizes of the video files we've got are just too enormous that even gigabit wouldn't help as far as offsite storage goes, or sending stuff to external editors. They're just, you know, you do a 3-second video and it's already a couple of gigabytes. So yeah, gigabit would be great, but not going to do a huge amount for us. Other cool gadgetry, I can't really think of anything much I'd particularly want to have. I'm not into the smart fridges, not into the TVs in the kitchen and stuff, so yeah. Yeah, they're just looking at the messages again. Yeah, there are some. We've got a Ubiquiti-based MX here, which is going across the island, across the bay, which is going across to an island, across the bay, which is going across to another island, all the way back, which services this side. We were hoping, we've got someone else providing our internet at where we're staying, who lives just up the road, and we basically have our antenna pointed up at his house. So yeah, that's all Ubiquiti as well. But the company which does this side doesn't do that side of the island, and they don't have capacity over this side, which is why we only got internet until last night, because he was waiting for some parts to come in to upgrade one of their antennas, or radio units, but didn't come in, so we had to go with someone else. But they came in last night and got us all sorted, so we have internet here. And we're hoping we might be able to do like a monthly live stream, just as a sort of status update, sort of Q&A thing. Before we finish up, is there anything anyone would like to see in detail? We can take a camera pretty much anywhere other than into the kiln, because it's too much hassle. And I don't think the walls will allow the video signal to get through. But if anyone wants to see any particular bit of machinery up here or down in the machinery room, I can take requests for a little bit, and then we'll probably finish up. Yeah, so with the lag, finally, Fluffy Jones asked to see the gear pit. Yes, we can do that. We can. We've got lights down there. We'll take the camera down, and you can see what we can see. Okay, this is the machinery room. Focus, that would help. So this is our big main gear, which has got bits of stone on it. And that goes down into the pit. Over here we've got the main shaft, which goes up to the
big wooden toothed main gear. Lots of machinery back here. Yeah, this is all the dark coloured stuff on here is all grease, as with on the teeth of the main gear, all the dark coloured stuff is grease as well. I don't know if I can, it's quite a heavy camera, let's see if I can actually lift this up. It's probably got quite a bit of debris down there because we've been removing cement from the walls. That's about as good as it's going to get. Then over here we've got the main shaft coming in from outside. It's very cramped space in here. So this wall is has been cement all over it, but we've been removing that. And you can sort of see where we've still got a couple of patches there, but that was all cement and it's finally drying out. That upper section just under the other cement looks a lot darker, but there was a whole patch running down there which looked that sort of same dark colour without the mortar, and that's where the cement was covering up. Cement just traps the water behind it, just masks the problem if you've got water coming in. Stream onto my phone and see if there's a message. Any more requests before we go? Okay, yeah, that big gear is literally a hole in the bedrock, because yeah, bedrock is about probably 20-30 centimeters from the level of where this post is sitting. The actual bedrock is just down there. Sorry, really bad things. Have that audio coming through. Yeah, so they would have had to dig a pretty substantial hole to put this in. So that's not quite bedrock there, but I'd say that that's been bedrock which has been dug out, and then this whole mounting mechanism is sitting on top of stones which are sitting on the bedrock. Time-lapse first go of us working throughout the day. We've tried doing some of that, but it's a bit challenging because we're typically running around a lot, moving between places. And we also have a small human who we need to check on constantly or take walkies and stuff. We try and time our work here, so she needs an afternoon nap. We try and time our work here, so we're working on the mill in the afternoons while she's sleeping, and then in the mornings we're doing architecture stuff and planning, as we're still in the thick of that. But yeah, we've tried sort of time-lapsing a day, but
It's never really working on just one spot, which is a little bit difficult to just be very jumpy around. Let's see. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us. It's been fun to show everyone around and see your questions.
So yeah, thank you so much. It's really great to be able to communicate with you all, and we'll do another live stream at some point when we've got a bit more progress happening in the mill. So then when we walk around, it has like the next stage, which would be really nice.
Yeah, or if we're doing something more impressive than just
mortar.
tapping away at the walls all day.
Yeah, so like maybe, I don't know.
When we actually get to doing something,
Something specific,
we
yeah.
can do a live stream for that sort
Yep.
of thing. Because like we're a bit short on videos at the moment because we've literally just spent the whole day just hammering a chisel
We
at the
thought
wall,
you didn't want to
and
watch us like paint dry.
It is. It's really zen doing it.
Yeah,
It's very relaxing and zen to do,
but not.
It's very dull to watch.
Yeah, so once we get a bit more into,
very slow
especially the
going.
roof, when we start getting more into the roof or doing the floors or all the building side of it,
Yeah.
then we'll get a
Like,
few more.
The stuff we're doing at the moment is sort of 5 hours of work results in under a square meter of progress.
Yeah, so
Which, it's so because someone was asking if we do a time lapse of a whole day's work, and I'm like, well.
yeah, we'll do that once we get further along. Yeah, then I think you'll be a bit more interested. Though we could make these videos into those Zen videos for people to watch, like they watch paint dry to go to sleep or something. Yeah, to watching water come off the walls.
There's some really satisfying moments, like where you get the big patches and the whole big patch just starts to go and it's going,
And it all falls out.
oh yes, so good. But
Yeah.
Generally when you're just like chipping away at little bits, like the wall I was showing over there by the stairs, that's going to be a couple of days to clear, if not a week, and it's just going to be tap, tap, tap.
And then we're going to be doing, after that, we'll be doing eventually the mortar back into it. So that will be another,
Like
this
if
is the most fiddly.
Like if we're ripping
part
up
of
all
it.
the floors or doing all the floor beams and then rejointing everything.
Yeah.
That would make
That would make a
that would
good
make a great time lapse, that sort of thing, because you can actually see something
Be
happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or when we're pulling all the beams down and rejointing the ends, that might make an interesting live stream. Instead of just doing a video about it, because we're actually doing something,
Yeah.
visibly
Yeah.
doing something, rather than just standing
In the
facing
same
wall.
spot, yeah. But all right. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's this is what we've managed to do in 2 months. It's been 2 months and I think 1 day since we've been working on this
Yep.
now.
and it really feels so much better. Just having it cleared out, it's just been really great.
Yeah, getting all the junk out. Our helper has been absolutely amazing at clearing all the junk from the building. There's probably literally a ton of stuff from the top floor down. He's carried down all the stairs.
Yeah.
That's been amazing. Has made a huge difference to like that top floor you couldn't see across.
Yeah.
And just the steam cleaning has made a massive difference. It does not smell like mold in here anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a massive improvement. It's a lot darker in here now that all the light coloured mold is off the walls.
Yes, that's the other
There's a
thing.
lot less reflection of light, but
Yeah. But hopefully eventually and also when we get the windows done, we'll be able to show you views out of the windows.
We actually bought some A4 Perspex sheets, or polycarbonate or Perspex, I don't remember.
I don't know.
But yeah, I've got some A4 size polycarbonate sheets, I think, which we're going to put into all the boarded up windows so we can get some light coming in now that we're coming into a season where there is actually daylight.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we're starting to see more solar radiance, so we might as well take advantage of it. So that's going to be another thing we're going to be doing soon. And if we're waiting on our second lot of building warrant and listed, which is actually going to be our internals, if we're going to be waiting too long on that, we're probably going to lime wash all the walls just to brighten the place up a bit while we're working, rather than just having, dark coloured mortar on the walls.
Yes, yeah.
Just gives a bit more brightness in here from the reflected light.
Yep, because we're going to be covering, the only bit we won't do is the interior wall, because those interior walls we're going to have as exposed stone. So those ones will be keeping.
We must remember that when we get plastered.
So
they're chipping away at the wall again.
Yeah, so those are the bits where we're going to be taking a bit more time and making it look nice, whereas the other bit it's like, just get it out and it doesn't matter what it looks like. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much,
thank you so
everyone,
much
for joining us, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend.
Yep.
And we'll see you when we get our next video edited. It's almost done. We're trying to have a bit of a more entertaining intro.
Yeah.
We've got to do a little bit more voiceover for that, and I'm learning how to do some animation stuff, so working on that as well. But with the little one having her moles come through, there's not really been any free
sleep
time.
happening.
No. Well, when she's up till 4 a.m. and
so she's like a Duracell bunny. It just keeps going.
I wish I had the energy she had. I don't have the energy to do the video editing.
Yeah.